We're up to the beginning of Daf Zayin Amid Aleph, a few lines into the page. Amar Mar, Hasheichi b'muchni shchitas ikshera. If you shecht on a wheel, so you put the knife on a wheel and you spin the wheel, and it shecht is kosher because it was done by a person. Aiva Tanya, but doesn't the Brisa say shchitas psula, that if you use a wheel it's possible? So the Gemara says like kasha. Habesarna de pachra, when it's kosher is when you use a wheel that is manually operated, so it's considered done by the man. Habesarna de maya. The second brisa, which says is no good, is where you're using a water-based wheel. So it's being turned by the water, not by the person. Or Iba Yisema, or another answer, Habrasan and Maya. Both brises are talking about the water wheel. So how do you explain why one brisa says kasha, one brisa says pasal? Habekayach rishon, habekayach sheni. The answer is it depends how the water goes. Meaning, you have this wheel, and the water is held back by a door. You open the door, and the water goes through. So if you open up the door and then it immediately shechs koyach rishon, so then it's considered ki'ilu, it's done by the person. The brisa that says no good is where the wheel keeps spinning after you open the door, and then it's going now. It's a grama. It's going koyach sheni. It's going on its own, and then it continues to turn. That's considered a grama, and that's not considered a kasher shchita. Where do we see that there's a difference between the immediate water that comes out after opening the door and the subsequent water? Rav Papa said that if you have a person who binds his fellow down, and then causes a gush of water to sweep over him and then he dies, chayiv. So I mean, if you open the door and then he drowns, it's chayiv because it's considered murder. My timer. The Gemara says because Giri diduhu dahanibe, because it was his actions that caused him to die. Bahani milukayach rishon, but that's only if he died from the initial surge of water. Abakayach sheni, but if he died from the subsequent water, grama ba'alma, it's considered a grama. It says the Gemara, Yasiv Rab achari de Rechia, Rab was sitting behind Rechia, but Rechia came to Rabbi. Yasiv Rabbi Kamar, Menayin l'shchita shu b'talosh. How do I know that the shchita has to be with an item that's separated, like not attached to the ground? Remember, we had this yesterday, that Rabbi Shita is that if it's attached to the ground, it's possible, because it says, V'yikach hasamachelos lishchait. It says, Avram Avinu took the knife to slaughter Yitzchak, and a knife is obviously detached, so the fact that it says that Avram took a knife, and he did not use something attached to the ground, indicates that you're not allowed to use something attached to the ground. Now the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Rav Chia, Rav said to Rav Chia, Maiko Amar, what is Rebbe's proof? Amar le, meaning he doesn't hold to the proof. Rav Chia said to Rav, he said something, his raya is full of cracks. So what meaning? They both don't hold of the raya. So the Gemara says, Hakra Kamer, isn't it a pasuk? What do you mean you don't hold of it? It's a pasuk. The answer is it's not a good raya. Why? The pasuk doesn't say that you have to use a knife. It just says Avram took a knife. Maybe really you could use a stone that's attached to the ground. But Avram Avinu did not want to rely on a stone. He was, being extra prepared. He brought a knife. But it's lav dafka that you have to use a knife. So the fact that Avram Avinu used a knife might have been just a sign of zerizus, not necessarily that you have to. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, pshitali, taloshul b'seif chivroi. Let's say you have something that was detached and then reattached to the ground, like a building, which are stones that were attached, part of the ground, then they became detached, and then they're reattached. What is the status of said building in halacha? So in an avodah zara, havatalash. We know when it comes to avodah zara, it's detached. What do I mean? When it comes to avodah zara, the halacha is that something that's attached to the ground, you cannot make aser. If you bow down to a mountain, the mountain is not aser. But if you bow down to a building, the building does become aser, because once it's detached from the ground, even if it's reattached to the ground, it's considered detached. Amar, hamishtachav alabayis shaloi aser. If you bow down to your own house, it's aser. It has to be your own house because you can't aser someone else's house. But if you bow down to the house, it's aser. Now, if we look at the house as if it's really attached to the ground, anything attached to the ground does not become aser, because it says Eloheihem Eloharim B'Leharim Eloheihem. Their gods were on the mountains, but the mountains cannot be their gods. Meaning, if you bow down to a mountain, it's not aser. So the fact that a house is not aser, it becomes aser, indicates that the house is considered detached when it comes to avodah zarah. Now, what about being susceptible to tumah? Let me explain outside. We'll see it inside. When it comes to be susceptible to tumah, we've had many times. The item has to become wet, and you have to be happy that it became wet. So the question is, so when it comes to the item becoming wet, as we'll see in a moment, either the item itself, the flour, the produce itself has to become wet, and you're happy about it, But let's say you don't really care about the produce getting wet, but you're happy that something detached from the ground became wet, and then it agav wet the produce. So let's say I have a ladder which is detached to the ground, obviously, and I'm happy the ladder got wet because I needed it. It was muddy, and I'm happy it got rained on. And then it splashed from the ladder to the fruit. The halacha is that the fruit are now susceptible to tumah. Because you're happy that the water touched something detached from the ground, and then it subsequently touched fruit, that's enough. So our discussion is, what we're going to see, is what if I want the water to touch a building? I want it to wash the building. So if the building is considered attached to the ground, and then it splashed from the building and it splashed onto fruit or vegetables. So if the building is considered attached to the ground, then the halacha is, if it's considered attached to the ground, then the fruits and vegetables are not susceptible to tumah, because I'm not happy that something detached became wet. But if the if the building is considered detached from the ground, because it was detached at one moment, then the fruits and vegetables would be susceptible to tumah. So the Gemara is going to analyze this. The Gemara says, "D'tanan, hakoifa kara ala kaisel." If you put a plate on top of the wall while it was raining, and the rainwater hit the plate, and then it touched fruits or vegetables, so are the fruits and vegetables susceptible to tumah? So it depends. Are you happy that the plate got wet? B'shvil shetudach, if you wanted the plate to be washed, then you wanted something detached to the ground to become wet. So then the fruits or vegetables that subsequently got wet are susceptible to tumah. But if you don't want the plate to get wet, you only put the plate on the wall because you wanted to protect the wall from getting wet. Let's say there was, you didn't want it to cause damage to the building, so you put the plate there. So then the plate is not, you're not interested in the plate getting wet. So then you're not interested in the plate getting wet, and then the fruits and vegetables are definitely not interested. So then it is not susceptible to tumah. Now, the question is, what about a building? So the Gemara is going to analyze that the building case is sort of in between. You have the case of the plate, and then where you're interested in getting wet, and then you have the case of the plate where it's protecting the building. The question is, what about a case where I want the building to get wet? That's not really addressed. So the Gemara says, Hogu v'kasha. So it's a bit of a contradiction. The first case is that you want the plate to get rinsed, and then it becomes susceptible to tumah. Implying that only in that case, because the plate is completely detached. But if you wanted the building to get wet, it's considered not considered detached. It's considered attached to the ground, and it's not. It will not. The fruits and vegetables will not be susceptible to tumah if they subsequently got wet. But then the Brisa says that if you put the plate there just to protect the building, which implies if he implies that you want the building to get wet, then the water that subsequently touched the fruits and vegetables would be susceptible to tumah. So, wanting the building to get wet, is it enough? Is it considered detached regarding susceptibility to tumah or not? It's a bit of a contradiction. So the Gemara says, Rav Elazar says they're authored by two different people. This Bryce is not authored by one person, so it's a machlekes. So whether a house is considered attached or detached when it comes to susceptible tumah is a machlekes. Rav Papa Amar Kula Chadutanahu. Rav Papa says no. Really, it's one Bryce, and this is how you're supposed to read it. Habakaisel meura. It depends which wall we're talking about. When the Bryce implies that if I want the wall to get wet, it's not susceptible to tumah, that's talking about the wall of a cave, where it was completely attached from the beginning of time. B'kaisel binin, the part of the Bryce that indicates that if I want the wall to get wet, it is considered detached, and it would cause the fruits or vegetables that subsequently get wet to be susceptible to tumah. It's talking about a case where it's the wall of a building, because it was detached, even though it's reattached, it's considered detached to the ground. This is how you read the Brisa. If you put a plate on the wall, over a wall, because you want the plate to get wet, it's susceptible to tumah. But if you want the wall to get wet, it's not susceptible to tumah. When is this true? So, the wall of a cave, because the wall of a cave is considered, it was attached to the ground from the beginning of time. But the wall of a building, it's considered detached. So this shayla, he's saying over here, according to this brisa, something that was attached, then detached, then reattached is considered detached in halacha when it comes to susceptibility to tumah. Boy, Rav Esakasha, go to the next page. Talush ubsayv chibru linin shchita mai. What about something that was attached to the ground? It was detached and then it's reattached when it comes to shchita. Now the truth is, we talked about this. Yesterday we said if you take a knife and plug it into the wall, according to Rabbi, you're not able to use that for shechita. So what's the question over here? So he's going to have a different interpretation of what we saw yesterday. Tashema haya tzur yaitz min hakaisel. If there was a sharp knife sticking out of the wall, or a reed that's growing, it's puzzle. Now, this sharp knife sticking out of the wall, is this not referring to a case where it was detached and then I reattached it, and you see that it's not good? So you see that it's considered a part of the ground and it's not roy l'shchita. So the Gemara says no. The case where the stone sticking out of the wall is a problem is not where it was reattached. It's where it was a stone sticking out of the wall from the beginning of time. It's that it was, you chisel out part of the wall and there's stone sticking out, but it was never detached. It was always attached, and that's why it's a problem. But we don't know the halacha if it was detached and then reattached. Dekanami, I'll prove it to you that this stone sticking out of the wall was always that way, because the next case of the Braisa is a reed growing. Obviously, the reed growing was always mechubel karka, so to the stone is also mechubel karka as well. So we're still looking for the halacha regarding a situation where you reattach something. Basically, you take a stone, you reattach it as part of a building. Is it considered mechubel karka for shechita or not? So Tashima, no atzakin b'kaisel v'shacha b'shchita sekshera. The Brisa clearly states that if you take a knife, stick it into the wall, and shecht on it, it's kosher. So you see that even though it's attached to the building, it's considered detached. The Gemara says it's not a raya. The stone, maybe it's considered detached because you don't plan on leaving the stone there long term. You see, we're talking about a case of a building where it's going to be like connected forever. Again, you're reattaching it for a very long time. Maybe the building is considered attached to the ground again. The case of the stone, it's not considered mechubel karka because the case of the knife, it's not considered mechubel karka because it's talking about a knife, but you stick it into the wall. How long are you going to leave it for, therefore? It's obviously not long-term. It's more of a temporary. Temporary is considered talush. Our discussion is something that you plan on leaving there for a while. It was detached, and then you reattached it for a long term. Is considered mechubel karka or not? So Tashema no it's sakin because of shach sheres. The Gemara says no shani sakin to mevatale. The case of the knife, it's different. It's not nullified to the wall. It's not meant to be there permanently, as opposed to a building where it is meant to be permanently. So we don't know what the halacha would be in that case. Tashema. The Brisa then says that if you attach it to the ground, if you take something detached and attach it to the ground, it's kosher. So you see that even after it's attached to the ground, if it's detached, if you reattach it, it's considered talush, it's considered detached. So the Gemara says maybe that too is talking about a knife as well. But I don't know what the halacha would be regarding a stone that you reconnect to the wall where it's meant to be there long term. Maybe it's considered mechubar, you cannot use it for shechita. So Amar Mar, new topic, and we talked about taking a knife and plugging it into the wall and then moving the neck of the animal against it. And we said that it's kosher. No, it's sakin because shechita b'shechita sheres. It says the Gemara, Amar Rav Anan Amar Shmuel, lo yishanu l'shah sakin l'mayla v'tzavar b'hem l'mata. It's only true if it's attached to the wall. See, normally if I take a knife, I could hold the knife under the animal's neck and shech that way, or I could hold it above the animal's neck and rotate the animal, 180, and move and shecht it that way. Doesn't matter the position of the knife. The question is, what about when it's attached? So the Brisa says Rav Anan Amar Shmuel, when it's attached to the wall, it's only kosher if the knife is above, facing downward, and you slide the neck of the animal under the knife. But if you hold the knife under it and you put the neck of the animal above the knife, that's a problem. Why? We're afraid that because it's not like you're using a sawing motion, the knife is stationary in the wall. We're afraid that when you move the neck of the animal that's above the knife, you'll let go of the animal a little bit, and the animal's neck will basically be chopped on the knife. And that's, instead of using the sawing motion, you'll sort of press the neck of the animal using gravity, and it'll shech that way. So dafka, when it's attached to the ground, when it's attached to the wall, it depends on the position of the knife. Says the Gemara Hakatani, I thought it says in the Brisa that we don't care the position of the knife. It could be below the neck, above the neck. So it's kosher either way. So the Gemara says no. When is it does it matter? Does it not matter when the knife is in the hand of the sheikh and it's not attached to the wall? When it's attached to the wall, then it definitely matters. Amar Zvid Stadin Katani Sakin Lamata v'Tzavar behem Lamayla b'Tolush Sakin Lamayla v'Tzavar behem Lamata b'Mechuber. Meaning, so it only doesn't matter when it's detached. But when the Brisa says that either way is okay, is when it's detached. But when it's attached, the knife has to be above the animal's neck. Rav Papa Amar ba'oifet dekol. Rav Papa says it could be actually the Brisa is talking about a knife that's attached to the wall, and it's good either way. I thought we said it matters where the knife is. The answer is this is talking about a chicken, a bird. It doesn't matter where the knife is because the bird's not heavy enough that we're afraid that the knife will be that the neck will push down on the knife. A cow, it matters. So when the Brisa says it doesn't matter, it's talking about a chicken. Amr Rav Chizda Amr Rav Yitzchak. There are 5 halachas regarding the stem of a reed. Apparently the stem of a reed, if you try to use it to break something, it'll splinter. And because it'll splinter, it causes the 5 halachas. It's not kosher for shechita, because if it'll splinter, it might puncture the neck of the animal. You can't use it for a bris milah, because the splintering might cause damage to the baby. You cannot use it to cut meat, because the splinters, you might come to have splinters in the meat, and then if you swallow the splinters, it could be dangerous. You can't use this to pick your teeth because the splinters might cause your gums to bleed, might cause infection. You can't wipe yourself with it. The Gemara at first assumes this means cleaning after the bathroom, and the Gemara eventually will say no, it means to wipe a wound. The Brisa says you can't use it to shecht. But doesn't the Brisa say kol shechtin bein betzor bein mischuk bein krum shel kana? I thought you're able to use a reed to shecht. So the Gemara says Amar Papa besimna da'agma. Normally a reed is not allowed because it splinters. The one case where a reed is allowed is called the simna da'agma. It's called the sedge of a marshland. Apparently that's a very sharp reed where it's not going to splinter. You cannot use it to cut meat. Rav Papa used a reed to cut the innards of a fish because apparently the innards of the fish are transparent. So if there's any splinters, you'll see it and remove it, as opposed to meat where it can be embedded in the meat. Rabbi Rav Huna would cut chicken with it because chicken is so soft that it would not cause the reed to splinter. You cannot use it to wipe. We at first think that it means after the bathroom. It says the Gemara, forget about using this because it'll splinter. I thought the Gemara says that if you use anything that's flammable, like a reed or a stick, anything that's firewood causes damage to that part of the body. So forget about the splintering. I thought all types of reeds are a problem, even if it won't splinter. So Rav Papa, Rav Papa says, you're right. When the Brisa says you're not allowed to use it to wipe, it doesn't mean to clean after the bathroom, it means to wipe a wound. The Gemara says one last halacha. Hakol sheichtin l'oilum sheichtin. Hakol sheichtin, hakol b'shchita, v'afilu oif. Hakol sheichtin means that all are slaughtered. It means hakol b'shchita. You have to shecht. Afilu oif, even a chicken. Okay, meaning even though a chicken is not, meaning although the pasuk specifically talks about animals, chickens also require shchita. Then the Mishnah said, La'olam sheichtin, we always slaughter. Right? The Mishnah said, Hakol sheichtin, La'olam sheichtin. So Hakol sheichtin is to include chickens. La'olam sheichtin means you always have to slaughter. What does that mean? So Man Tana Amarab Rabbi Yishmael. This follows the view of Rabbi Yishmael, the Tanya. The Brisa says like this, that Hashem said to Klal Yisrael, Ki yarchev Hashem leikechas gvulcha b'asher diber lach, that when Hashem will broaden your boundary, meaning i.e. when you enter Eretz Yisrael, ve'amarta oichla basar, and you say, I'm going to eat meat, meaning, the pasuk says that you'll basically eat meat when you enter Eretz Yisrael. What is this pasuk telling you? So Rabbi Yishmael says, Leiba akasav alahatel hembesa taiva. What the pasuk is saying is that when you enter Eretz Yisrael, then you're allowed to eat meat that's not a carbon. In the midbar, they were not allowed to just shecht an animal and eat the animal. You had to bring it as a carbon. So the only time they were allowed to eat meat as regular consumption was when they entered Eretz Yisrael. So what's the chiddush? Shebetchila nesel mebasa taiva. When they were in the midbar, they couldn't just shech meat for a meal. Mishnichas la'aretz hutel lahem basa taiva. Says Rabbi Yishmael, it's a chiddush. According to Rabbi Yishmael, it's a chiddush. That means that in the midbar they were not allowed to just shecht an animal to eat it. They had to be a carbon. But he's saying when they enter Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to. So what does it have to do with la'olam sheichtin? So you might think that because it was only permitted when they enter Eretz Yisrael, that when the Churban happened, it reversed back to being Osir as well, and we're not allowed to eat meat, we have to be vegetarians, and now that we're exiled and no longer in Eretz Yisrael, you might think the original Isser comes back, and we wouldn't be allowed to eat meat. That's what the Mishnah says, that no, you're allowed to shecht even in Golus. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah according to Rabbi Shmuel. So Maskor Rav Yosef says Akasha, Hai lo'ilam sheichtin lo'ilam sheichtin v'oichlin boile. Then it shouldn't say sheichtin, it should say lo'ilam sheichtin v'oichlin. The point is not shechita. The point is that you don't have to be a vegetarian. It should say you're allowed to eat meat, not sheichtin. But also, what's the havamin? The havamin is that because we weren't allowed to eat meat in the midbar, therefore we shouldn't be allowed to eat meat in Golus as well. It's a pella. The reason why we weren't allowed to eat meat in the midbar is because you had to bring it as a carbon. We were so close to the Mishkan that there was no excuse not to bring it as a carbon. So you brought it as a carbon, as a shlam, and you ate part of the meat. So why would I think that when the Churban happened, I'm not allowed to eat meat? Adarabah, in the Churban, there's no more karbanis anymore. So Adarabah, it's more of a reason to be lenient. So it's a pella. So why was it that it was also, according to Rabbi Shmuel, to eat regular meat in the midbar outside of a karbanos? Because they're so close to the Mishkan, there's no excuse not to bring karbanos. And why was it mutter when they entered Eretz Yisrael to have a merchakim Mishkan? Because not everyone lived in Yerushalayim. But if that's the case, then what do I need a pasuk to be matir eating meat nowadays? There's no Beis Hamikdash anymore. There's no alternative. Of course, it's mutter. So the Gemara is a different pshat. So rather, the pshat is not like Rabbi Shmuel. Again, according to Rabbi Shmuel, when they were in the midbar, they weren't allowed to eat stam meat, and then when they entered Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Rabbi Akiva says no, they were always allowed to eat meat. So what's the pasuk referring to? Amr Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Akiva, he detanya ki yarchim michal makam mishiyecha lakacha sham sham zavatul mekarchim tzenecha. When you enter Eretz Yisrael, you'll shecht. What does that mean? Rabbi Akiva oimer leba kasav leeslen besar nechira. Rabbi Akiva says that apparently in the midbar they were allowed to eat meat that you didn't cut with a knife, but you pierced the esophagus and the trachea. If you pierced them, even if it wasn't a regular cut with a knife, a clean cut, it was kosher in the midbar. And in Eretz Yisrael, it's no longer kosher. When they were in the midbar, they were allowed to eat meat that was pierced, the neck was pierced. And when they enter Eretz Yisrael, it's not allowed. So you might think that because it became mutter only when they entered Eretz Yisrael, but when we went into Galus, Hashem Rachmanis, that you could eat meat that was pierced in the neck as well. And that's the point of the mission. No, you have to shecht even in Galus. What is the side of machlekes? Rabbi Akiva savar besar tayv leitzer klal. Rabbi Akiva holds that there was never a time in the midbar. It was never also you didn't have to be a vegetarian. So it was never also that I don't. So he disagrees with Rabbi Shmuel. You don't need a pasuk to be matir it. And Rabbi Shmuel counters besar nechir leishteri klal. Rabbi Shmuel says there was never a time where you were allowed to eat pierced meat that was never shechted, but the neck was pierced, because it was never permitted. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that you're allowed to continue it. That you have to shecht in galus. That it doesn't revert back to the heter. There was never a heter. I will stop here. Pick it up tomorrow.